Captain Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of New Busan Colony, watching the morning sun rise over the purple mountains. The colony had been peaceful for 3 years now. 2,000 humans called this world home. They had built farms, schools, and small factories. Life was simple but good. The alarm changed everything. "Captain, we have massive energy readings in orbit," called Engineer Ji-ho from the control room. His voice carried worry. "Something big just dropped out of hyperspace." Hyun-woo ran to the command center. The main screen showed a ship unlike anything in human records. It was huge, maybe 10 times larger than their biggest transport vessel. The hull was dark metal with strange curves and spikes. It looked like something designed to hunt. "Are they responding to our signals?" Hyun-woo asked. "No, sir. They're just sitting there, waiting." Dr. So-min hurried into the room, her lab coat still on from the morning research work. She was the colony's expert on alien life forms. So far, they had only found simple animals and plants on this world. Nothing dangerous, nothing intelligent. "What do we know about this ship?" she asked, studying the screen. "Nothing good," Ji-ho replied. He pulled up sensor data. "The energy signature is off the charts. Their weapons could destroy our entire colony in minutes." Hyun-woo felt cold fear in his stomach. New Busan had basic shields and a few small defense guns. They were meant to handle pirates or wild animals. Not this. The communication system suddenly came alive with a deep, harsh voice. "Humans of this small world. I am Keth Moran of the Vorthak Empire. You will listen." The voice made everyone in the room step back. It sounded like grinding metal, mixed with a growling beast. "I am listening," Hyun-woo replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your species is new to this sector. You have built on a world that borders our territory. This cannot be allowed without testing." "Testing?" Hyun-woo asked. "The Vorthak have ruled this region for 1,000 of your years. We are the apex predators of space. Every species must prove they deserve to exist near us." Dr. So-min grabbed Hyun-woo's arm. She whispered, "I've heard stories about the Vorthak. They're supposed to be unstoppable hunters. No one has ever seen them negotiate." Keth Moran continued speaking. "I offer you a simple test. I will leave 3 of my offspring on your world. They are young now, but they will grow. In 2 years, I will return." "What kind of test is this?" Hyun-woo asked. "My cubs are born killers. Even as younglings, they are more dangerous than any creature you have faced. You have 2 choices. Kill them now while they are weak, or let them live and face the consequences." The room went silent. Everyone stared at the screen. "If you kill my cubs, you prove you are strong enough to survive near Vorthak space. You may keep your colony. If you try to raise them or ignore them, they will eventually hunt down every human on your world. Then I will return to find a dead colony." Dr. So-min stepped forward. "What if we find a third option?" Keth Moran made a sound like laughing, but colder. "There is no third option, human. The Vorthak are perfect predators. We cannot be tamed. We cannot be changed. Kill or be killed. This is the way of the universe." "And if we refuse the test entirely?" Hyun-woo asked. "Then I destroy your colony right now. At least the test gives you a chance." The screen went dark for a moment. When it returned, they could see 3 small objects falling from the alien ship toward their planet's surface. They looked like metal pods. "The cubs are now on your world," Keth Moran said. "You will find them in the forest region, grid 774. Remember, humans, kill them fast or they will kill you slow. I will return in 2 years to see the results." The massive ship turned and jumped back into hyperspace, leaving New Busan alone with an impossible choice. Engineer Ji-ho pulled up a map showing where the pods had landed. It was 20 miles from the main settlement, deep in the forest where the colonists sometimes went hunting. "We need to call a colony meeting," Hyun-woo said. "Everyone needs to hear about this." 2 hours later, the entire population of New Busan gathered in the main hall. Parents held their children close. Farmers still had dirt on their hands from the morning work. Teachers looked worried about their students. Hyun-woo explained everything: the alien ship, the test, and the 3 creatures now living in their forest. "So we have to kill them?" asked Dong-hyun, one of the farmers. "Kill children?" "They're not children," said Maria, the colony's doctor. "They're alien predators. We don't know what they're capable of." Teacher Nari raised her hand. "But they are young. The alien said so himself. How dangerous can they really be?" Dr. Somin had been quiet during the discussion. Finally, she spoke. "I want to see them first. Before we make any decisions, we need to know what we're dealing with." "That's dangerous," Hyun-woo warned. "What if they attack you?" "What if they don't?" she replied. "Look, I understand this is scary, but we're talking about taking lives here, even alien lives. Shouldn't we at least look them in the eye first, old?" Man Tae-ho, the colony's senior farmer, stood up slowly. "In my 70 years, I've learned something important. The moment you start killing the young, you become the monster." "But these aren't normal young," argued Security Chief Woo Jin. "The alien was clear. They're designed to be killers." "Designed, maybe," said Teacher Nari. "But are they born killers, or do they become killers? There's a difference." The debate continued for hours. Some colonists wanted to organize a hunting party immediately. Others refused to harm young creatures, no matter what species they came from. A few suggested packing up and leaving the planet entirely. Finally, Hyun-woo called for quiet. "Here's what we'll do. Dr. So-min will take a small team to observe the cubs from a safe distance. We'll learn what we can about them. Then we'll vote on our next action." "And if they attack the observation team?" asked Woo Jin. "Then we'll know what kind of creatures we're dealing with," Hyun-woo replied. As the meeting ended and colonists returned to their homes, Dr. So-min felt both excited and terrified. Tomorrow she would come face to face with alien predators that could determine the fate of everyone she cared about. She had no idea that this encounter would change not just New Busan, but the entire galaxy. Dr. So-min crept through the forest with 3 volunteers. Engineer Ji-ho carried the scanner equipment. Security Chief Woo Jin had his rifle ready, but not aimed. Teacher Nari brought her camera to record everything they found. The morning air was cool and quiet. Too quiet. Even the local birds had stopped singing in this part of the forest. "The signal is getting stronger," Ji-ho whispered, checking his scanner. "About 50 meters ahead." They moved carefully between the tall trees. Their boots made soft sounds on the fallen leaves. Everyone was tense, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Then they saw the first pod. It was made of dark metal and had cracked open like an egg. Something had broken out from the inside. Scratch marks covered the metal surface. The scratches looked deep and sharp. "Where is the creature?" Woo Jin asked, looking around with his rifle. Nari pointed to tracks in the soft dirt. "There, heading toward the stream." They followed the tracks carefully. The prints were small but showed claws. Whatever made them was about the size of a large dog. At the stream, they found it. The creature was drinking water. It looked up when it heard them coming. For a moment, nobody moved. The young Vorthak was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It had dark fur with silver stripes. Its eyes were large and intelligent, glowing with a soft blue light. When it opened its mouth, they could see rows of sharp teeth. But it was the size that surprised them most. The creature was no bigger than a human child. Maybe 30 pounds. It looked more curious than dangerous. "It's so small," Nari whispered. The cub tilted its head at the sound of her voice. It took a step toward them, then stopped. Its tail moved like a cat's tail when it's interested in something. "Don't move," Woo Jin warned. "It might attack." Instead, the cub sat down. It made a soft sound, almost like purring. I don't think it sees us as threats, So-min said quietly. She slowly reached into her pack and pulled out some dried meat from their lunch supplies. She tossed a small piece toward the cub. The creature sniffed the meat, then ate it quickly. It looked up at So-min with what almost seemed like gratitude. We need to find the other two, Jiho said. The scanner shows 2 more signals. They found the second cub an hour later. This one was stuck in a thorn bush, crying softly. Its fur was tangled, and it had small cuts from trying to escape. Oh no, Nari said. It's hurt. Without thinking, she moved toward the trapped cub. Wu Jin grabbed her arm. Are you crazy? It could bite you. Look at it, Nari said. It's scared and alone. It's just a baby. She carefully approached the cub. It watched her with big eyes, but didn't try to attack. Nari slowly worked to untangle its fur from the thorns. The cub held still as if it understood she was helping. When she freed it, the cub licked her hand with a rough tongue. Then it curled up against her leg. I think it likes you, So-min said with amazement. The third cub was the hardest to find. It had climbed high into a tree and was afraid to come down. It kept making distressed sounds. Jiho, who was good at climbing, went up to help it. The cub didn't fight him. Instead, it seemed grateful when he carried it safely to the ground. This makes no sense, Wu Jin said, looking at the 3 cubs. These are supposed to be deadly predators. They're acting like lost pets. So-min was taking notes and pictures. Maybe young predators are different. Maybe they only become dangerous when they grow up. Or maybe they become dangerous when they have to survive alone, Nari suggested. She was still holding the second cub, which had fallen asleep against her. They returned to the colony with more questions than answers. Captain Hyunwoo called another meeting that evening. So they're not immediately dangerous, he said after hearing their report. But that doesn't solve our problem. In a few months or years, they might become the killers that alien warned us about. What if they don't? Nari asked. What if we're looking at this wrong? Explain, Hyunwoo said. Nari stood up, still thinking. I'm a teacher. I work with children every day. What makes a child grow up to be good or bad? Usually it's how they're raised, who they learn from. You're suggesting we raise alien predators? Dr. Maria asked. That's insane. Is it? Nari continued. Look, these cubs are alone. They're scared. They're hungry. Right now, they're learning that humans help them instead of hurt them. What if we kept teaching them that? Old man Taeho nodded slowly. The teacher has a point. I've raised many animals on my farm. How you treat the young decides what they become as adults. But these aren't farm animals, Wu Jin argued. They're weapons designed by an alien species. Designed, maybe, So-min said, but not programmed. I did some research after we got back. Young mammals learn behavior from their families. If these cubs think we're their family, they might learn human behavior instead of Vorthak behavior, Hyunwoo finished. The room buzzed with worried conversations. The idea was crazy, but it was also hopeful. Farmer Dong-hyun raised his hand. If we're going to do this, we can't keep them all in one place. They need different families, different examples of how humans live. His wife Onji nodded. We have experience with animals. We could take one. I want the one that got stuck in the thorns, Nari said. It seems to trust me already. Engineer Jiho looked surprised at himself when he spoke. I'll take the third one, the climbing cub. I live alone anyway, and I work with my hands. Maybe I can teach it to build instead of destroy. Captain Hyunwoo looked around the room. This is completely against military protocol. If this goes wrong, we could all die. If we kill them, we definitely lose part of our humanity, Nari said quietly. I'd rather die trying to save them than live knowing we murdered children because we were afraid. The vote was close. 43 colonists voted to try raising the cubs. 37 voted to follow the aliens' instructions and kill them. The rest couldn't decide. It's settled then, Hyunwoo said. We'll try the impossible. We'll raise 3 alien predators as human children and hope that love is stronger than genetics. That night, 3 families prepared their homes for very unusual new members. None of them knew they were about to change the future of 2 species. The cubs, given the names Spark, Storm, and Shadow by the colony's children, slept peacefully for the first time since leaving their home world. Tomorrow would begin an experiment that would shock the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the 3 Vorthak cubs came to New Busan Colony. The changes were amazing and frightening at the same time. Spark, the cub living with teacher Nari and her son Minho, had grown to the size of a large wolf. Its silver. Stripes now glowed softly in the dark. But instead of hunting humans, Spark spent its days playing with the colony children and helping Nari in her garden. "Look what Spark can do now," Minho said excitedly to his mother. He pointed at a pile of fallen branches that had been blocking their garden path. Spark had carefully moved each branch to a neat stack without being asked. Nari watched in wonder. "It's learning to help instead of destroy. That's not normal predator behavior." At the farm on the colony's edge, Storm lived with Dong-hyun and Yoon-ji. This cub was the strongest of the 3 and had grown even larger than Spark. But Storm used its strength to help with farm work. It could carry heavy loads and had learned to be gentle with the smaller animals. "Storm protected our chickens from a wild fox yesterday," Yoon-ji told her husband while they watched the cub carefully moving eggs from the chicken house. A normal predator would have eaten the chickens itself. Dong-hyun nodded. "It thinks the chickens belong to our family, so it protects them like family." In the engineering district, Shadow lived with Jiho in a workshop filled with tools and machines. This cub had developed the most unusual abilities. Shadow could understand mechanical problems and even help fix them. "Hand me the small wrench," Jiho said while working under a broken water pump. Shadow looked at the toolbox, selected the right wrench with its mouth, and carefully placed it in Jiho's hand. The cub's eyes glowed brighter when it was thinking hard about mechanical puzzles. "Sometimes I think Shadow understands these machines better than I do," Jiho told Captain Hyunwoo during his weekly report. But the most surprising change was how the 3 cubs behaved together. Dr. So-min had been studying them carefully, and what she discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the Vorthak species. "They're supposed to be solitary hunters," she explained to the Colony Council. "According to every report we have, adult Vorthak never work together. They compete with each other, even kill each other for territory." "But these 3 are different?" Captain Hyunwoo asked. "Very different. Watch this." So-min showed them a video from the previous day. The 3 cubs were playing in the colony center when little Soo-jin, a 4-year-old girl, fell into the deep part of the irrigation canal. On the video, they could see Spark immediately dive into the water. Storm ran along the canal bank, keeping pace. Shadow somehow knew to run ahead to where the current would carry the girl. Working together, Spark pushed Soo-jin toward the bank while Storm reached down to grab her. Shadow was waiting at the perfect spot to help pull her to safety. "They planned that rescue," So-min said. "They communicated without making any sounds we could hear. They worked as a perfect team." "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Maria. "I think they're telepathic," So-min replied, "and I think living with human families has taught them something their own species forgot. They've learned to care about others." The most obvious example was Minho's relationship with Spark. The 12-year-old boy and the alien cub had become inseparable. They seemed to understand each other perfectly, even without words. Minho would think about being hungry, and Spark would bring him food. Spark would want to go exploring, and Minho would somehow know to grab his hiking boots. "It's like they share thoughts," Nari told her husband one evening. "Sometimes Minho answers questions that Spark hasn't even asked out loud." "Is that dangerous?" he asked. "I don't think so. If anything, it's made Minho more caring. He's become protective of all the smaller children in the colony. He's learning Spark's instincts, but the good parts. The peaceful life couldn't last forever. Captain Hyunwoo received a disturbing message from colony headquarters on Earth. Deep space monitoring. Stations had detected unusual Vorthak fleet movements. They're coming back early, Communications Officer Yuna reported with worry in her voice. The original timeline was 2 years. It's only been 6 months. How early? Hyunwoo asked. Our best estimate is 3 months, maybe less. The news spread through the colony like wildfire. Parents worried about their children. Farmers wondered if they should harvest their crops early. Everyone asked the same question. What had changed? Dr. So-min thought she knew the answer. She had been monitoring Vorthak communication frequencies and had noticed something strange. I think other young Vorthak are being affected too, she told the emergency council meeting. The telepathic connection between our cubs might be reaching farther than we realized. What do you mean? Hyunwoo asked. Young Vorthak across their empire might be feeling what our cubs feel, learning what our cubs learned. If that's true, it would explain why they're coming back early. Engineer Jiho looked pale. You're saying we accidentally changed their entire species? Maybe, and if we did, they won't be happy about it. That evening, the 3 cubs seemed restless. They gathered in the colony center, making soft sounds to each other. Their eyes glowed brighter than usual. Minho sat beside Spark, his hand on the cub's head. They know something's coming, he told his mother. Spark is scared, but not for himself. He's scared for us. What is he afraid of? Nari asked. Minho was quiet for a moment, listening to thoughts only he could hear. He says his birth father is angry, very angry, and he's bringing others. Storm and Shadow moved closer to Spark. The 3 cubs formed a circle, their glowing eyes looking up at the stars. They're trying to decide something, Minho said. Something important. What kind of decision? His mother asked. Minho's eyes grew wide with understanding. They want to protect us, but to do that, they might have to fight their own kind. Across the galaxy, on the flagship of the Vorthak fleet, Commander Keth Moran stared at reports that made no sense. Young Vorthak throughout the Empire were refusing orders. They were showing mercy to enemies. Some had even begun protecting other species instead of hunting them. The contamination is spreading, he growled to his officers. The humans have poisoned the purity of our species. This cannot continue. What are your orders, Commander? Asked. His second-in-command. We destroy the human colony immediately, and we destroy the 3 failures that were once my cubs, before their weakness spreads any further. Back on New Busan, the cubs suddenly raised their heads toward the sky. They had heard their father's thoughts across the vast distance of space. The final test was coming, and this time it would not be about survival. It would be about choosing which family they really belonged to. The sky over New Busan turned dark as 12 massive Vorthak warships dropped out of hyperspace. Each ship was 3 times larger than the one that had brought Keth Moran 6 months ago. Their weapons glowed like angry red eyes in the darkness. Captain Hyunwoo stood in the command center, watching the fleet take position around their planet. His hands shook as he counted the ships on the scanner. The colony's small defense system would last maybe 10 minutes against one of those vessels. Incoming transmission, Communications Officer Yuna announced. Her voice was tight with fear. Put it through, Hyunwoo said. Keth Moran's face appeared on the main screen. The alien commander looked different now. His eyes burned with rage, and his voice carried the promise of death. Humans of the failed colony, I have returned to find an abomination. Commander, we can explain, Hyunwoo began. Silence. Keth Moran's roar made everyone in the room step backward. My cubs live. That was not the problem. The problem is what you have done to them. The screen switched to show sensor readings from the Vorthak ships. The readings showed 3 life signs that glowed brighter than normal Vorthak signatures. My offspring have been contaminated with your weakness, Kethmoran continued. They show mercy. They protect the helpless. They work together instead of competing. You have made them less than Vorthak. We made them more than Vorthak, Dr. Somin said, stepping forward. She knew it was dangerous to speak, but someone had to defend what they had accomplished. More? Kethmoran laughed, but the sound was cold and bitter. You have made them soft, weak. They are no longer fit to be called my children. Down in the colony, the 3 cubs had gathered in the center square. Their adoptive families stood with them. Minho kept his hand on Spark's head, feeling the cubs' growing distress through their mental connection. Spark says his father is going to hurt us, Minho told the crowd that had gathered. But Spark doesn't want that to happen. Storm paced nervously near Dong-hyun and Yoon-ji. The large cub's eyes glowed brighter as it sensed the weapons pointed at its home. Shadow sat perfectly still next to Engineer Ji-ho, but its mental activity was intense. The cub was thinking faster than ever before, trying to find a solution to an impossible problem. Back in the command center, Kethmoran delivered his ultimatum. You will return my cubs immediately. I will then cleanse them of your contamination and restore their proper nature. After that, I will destroy your colony as punishment for interfering with Vorthak development. The cubs don't want to go with you, Captain Hyunwoo said. They've chosen their families. Cubs do not choose, Kethmoran snarled. They obey. This is another example of your corruption. Dr. Somin looked at her research data one more time. Commander, what if I told you that your cubs have developed abilities that pure Vorthak don't possess? What if they've become stronger, not weaker? Impossible. Working together makes a species weak. Competition makes it strong. This is the way of evolution. But your cubs saved a human child by working as a team. They solved problems that would have been impossible alone. They've learned to protect instead of just hunt. Kethmoran's expression grew even darker. That is exactly the contamination I speak of. Vorthak do not protect other species. We conquer them. What if conquest isn't the only form of strength? So-min asked. There is no other form. You will see this when my ships reduce your colony to ash. The transmission ended. Warning lights flashed throughout the colony as the Vorthak ships powered up their weapons. In the colony square, something extraordinary happened. The 3 cubs moved to the center of the crowd and began to glow. Not just their eyes, but their entire bodies gave off a soft, silver light. What are they doing? Nari asked, holding Minho close. They're talking to each other, Minho replied, but also to others, far away. What others? Minho's eyes went wide. Other young Vorthak, lots of them, all over their empire. The cubs' glow grew brighter. People throughout the colony stopped what they were doing to watch. Even Captain Hyunwoo left the command center to see what was happening. Through their telepathic network, Spark, Storm, and Shadow were doing something that had never been attempted in Vorthak history. They were calling out to every young member of their species, sharing what they had learned about cooperation, protection, and love. On Vorthak ships throughout the galaxy, young crew members suddenly stopped following orders. They began questioning why they were taught to fight instead of help. They wondered what it would be like to have families instead of just commanders. On Kethmoran's flagship, his own officers started acting strangely. The younger ones looked confused and uncertain. Some even suggested that maybe the humans should be studied instead of destroyed. What is happening to my crew? Kethmoran demanded. His science officer, a younger Vorthak named Torval, looked at the readings in amazement. The cubs on the planet are broadcasting on telepathic frequencies we didn't know existed. They're reaching young Vorthak across the entire fleet. Make them stop. I cannot, Commander. The signal is too strong and too widespread. Down on New Busan, the cubs' message was being received by thousands of young Vorthak. For the first time in their species' history, they were learning that there was another way to be strong. Minho translated what Spark was sharing with the other cubs across space. We are still hunters, but now we hunt for things to protect instead of things to kill. We are still strong, but now our strength serves love instead of fear. The effect was immediate and shocking. On ship after ship, young Vorthak began to refuse orders to attack. They demanded to know why they couldn't try the human way of raising cubs. Kethmoran realized that his simple plan to destroy one small colony had become something much bigger and more dangerous. His cubs hadn't just been contaminated by human weakness. They had become carriers of a new idea that threatened everything the Vorthak Empire stood for. "Prepare all weapons," he ordered his bridge crew. "We destroy the planet now, before this contamination spreads any further." But when he gave the order to fire, half his crew hesitated. The younger officers looked at each other with uncertainty. "Why, do we destroy instead of understand?" asked Torval. "What if the humans have discovered something valuable?" Kethmoran stared at his science officer in horror. The contamination had already reached his own ship. His own crew was beginning to think like humans instead of Vorthak. The war he had planned to fight against one small colony had become a civil war within his own species. And it had all started with 3 cubs who learned that love was stronger than fear. Kethmoran's patience ran out. Even with half his crew questioning orders, he still commanded the most powerful war fleet in this sector. He would destroy the human colony and end this contamination once and for all. "All ships, target the main settlement," he commanded. "Fire on my order." But before he could give the final command, his sensors detected something impossible. The 3 cubs on the planet were moving toward the human defensive positions, not away from them. "Why are my offspring joining the humans instead of returning to us?" he demanded. Science Officer Torval studied the readings. "Commander, they appear to be teaching the humans our combat techniques." Down on New Busan, an extraordinary transformation was taking place. Spark had positioned itself next to Captain Hyunwoo in the command center. Through Minho, who served as translator, the cub was sharing everything it knew about Vorthak technology and tactics. "Spark says their ships have weak spots in the rear. Engine sections," Minho explained rapidly. "If we can hit them there with concentrated fire, we can disable them without killing anyone." "How does a 6-month-old cub know that?" Hyunwoo asked. "All Vorthak cubs are born with basic knowledge about their ships and weapons," Dr. So-min answered. "It's genetic memory, but normally they use it to become better hunters, not to help defend against their own kind." At the farming district, Storm was working with Dong-hyun and the other farmers to turn their agricultural area into a maze of defensive positions. The powerful cub used its strength to move heavy equipment and create barriers that would funnel attacking forces into prepared killing zones. "Storm knows how Vorthak ground troops think," Yoonji explained to the defenders. "It's showing us how to make them confused and scared instead of confident." In the engineering section, Shadow was helping Ji-ho modify the colony's small defense weapons. The mechanically gifted cub somehow understood both human and Vorthak technology well enough to create hybrid weapons that neither species had ever seen before. "These modifications should penetrate their armor," Ji-ho announced to his team. Shadow figured out how to reverse their own defensive frequencies against them. The battle began at dawn. Kethmoran sent down dropships filled with Vorthak warriors. These soldiers expected to face terrified humans with primitive weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to predict their every move. Human defenders struck from unexpected angles, using Vorthak tactics that the attackers recognized but couldn't counter. The colonists fought with a coordination that confused the professional soldiers. "How do they know our battle formations?" demanded Ground Commander Vextar over the communication system. "The contaminated cubs are sharing our secrets," Kethmoran replied with growing anger. But the real shock came when the first Vorthak soldiers were captured instead of killed. Human fighters, guided by the cubs' knowledge, used non-lethal tactics to disable their enemies. They showed mercy to wounded opponents and offered medical help to prisoners. This kind of behavior was completely unknown in Vorthak warfare. Warriors, who expected to die fighting, found themselves being treated with kindness by their enemies. On the flagship, younger crew members watched the battlefields with amazement. "The humans fight like warriors but show mercy like healers," observed Navigator Kylran. "They are strong enough to kill but choose not to. Is this not a greater strength than simple destruction?" "It is weakness," Kethmoran snarled. But even he was beginning to doubt his words. The tide of battle turned when something unprecedented happened. Several young Vorthak soldiers on the ground began to refuse orders to attack human civilians. They had been influenced by the telepathic broadcasts from the three cubs, and they could no longer see humans as simple prey. "My own troops are abandoning their posts," Ground Commander Vextar reported with disbelief. "Some are even helping. Humans evacuate to safety." In space, the situation was even worse for Kethmoran. 3 of his 12 ships had stopped firing entirely. Their younger crew members had taken control and were demanding to negotiate with the humans instead of destroying them. "This is mutiny," Kethmoran declared. "This is evolution," replied Torval, his science officer. "Commander, what if we are witnessing the birth of a better version of our species? Better? We are apex predators. We have ruled this sector for 1,000 years through strength and fear. And where has that brought us?" asked Communications Officer Yilma, another young crew member. "We are alone in the galaxy. Every species fears us, but none respect us. We have no allies, no friends, no one who mourns our dead or celebrates our victories." Kethmoran looked around his bridge and realized that most of his younger officers were nodding in agreement. The contamination had spread even to his own command crew. On the planet's surface, the 3 cubs had gathered with their human families in the colony center. They were glowing brighter than ever, their telepathic message reaching across the entire Vorthak fleet. Through Minho, Spark spoke to the assembled colonists. "We want to show our birth species what we have learned. That family is stronger than fear, that protecting others makes you powerful in ways that conquering them never can." Storm added through Yunji's translation, "We have tasted love, and we cannot go back to eating only hatred." Shadow's message came through Jiho. "We can build instead of destroy. We can create instead of consume. This is the gift humans gave us." The broadcast was received by every young Vorthak in the fleet. Many of them began to openly weep, something their species was not supposed to be capable of. They were feeling emotions they had never been taught to recognize: longing for connection, desire for purpose beyond violence, hope for a different future. On ship after ship, young Vorthak began to question not just their orders, but their entire way of life. Why did they have to be alone? Why couldn't they have families like humans? Why was destruction the only strength their leaders recognized? Kethmoran watched his mighty fleet tear itself apart from within. His young officers were no longer following his commands. Some ships had stopped responding to communications entirely. Others were requesting permission to land and speak with the humans directly. The war he had planned to win in hours had become a revolution that threatened everything he believed about his own species. "Sir," Torval said quietly, "perhaps it is time to consider that the cubs have not been weakened by human contact. Perhaps they have been awakened to possibilities we never allowed ourselves to see." Kethmoran stared at the planet below, where his 3 offspring had chosen love over loyalty to their birth father. He was beginning to understand that this was not a battle he could win with weapons. The humans had defeated the mighty Vorthak Empire without firing a single shot in anger. They had done it by showing 3 abandoned cubs what it meant to be part of a family. Commander Kethmoran stood alone on his bridge, watching his empire crumble. Half his fleet had stopped following orders. The other half was asking questions he couldn't answer. Below him, the human colony continued to broadcast messages of hope. and family to his young warriors. "Sir," Communications Officer Yilma said softly, "we're receiving surrender requests from our own ground forces. They want to lay down their weapons and speak with the humans." Keth Moran closed his eyes. In one day, the mighty Vorthak Empire had been brought to its knees by 3 cubs and a handful of farmers. "Open a channel to the human settlement," he commanded. Captain Hyun-woo's face appeared on the screen. Behind him, Dr. So-min and the other colonists waited nervously. "I wish to speak with my offspring," Keth Moran said. His voice had lost its threatening edge. He sounded tired and confused. "They're here," Hyun-woo replied. "But I should warn you, they've chosen their families. They won't abandon the people who raised them." The screen split to show the 3 cubs in the colony center. Spark sat beside Min-ho, its eyes glowing with calm intelligence. Storm rested near Dong-hyun and Yoon-ji, its massive form relaxed and peaceful. Shadow worked quietly with Ji-ho on. Some mechanical project, solving problems instead of creating them. Keth Moran stared at his offspring for a long moment. They looked healthy and strong, but completely different from what he had expected them to become. "You were meant to be apex predators," he said finally. Through Min-ho, Spark replied, "We are still predators, Birthfather, but now we hunt for things to protect instead of things to destroy. You were meant to conquer and rule." Storm's message came through Yoon-ji. "We have conquered fear and learned to rule our own violent instincts. Is this not greater than conquering others?" "You were meant to be alone and strong," Shadow responded via Ji-ho. "We discovered that being together makes us stronger than we ever imagined possible. 1 Vorthak is powerful. 3 Vorthak working together are unstoppable. 3 Vorthak with human families behind them can change the galaxy." Keth Moran felt something crack inside his chest. He recognized the feeling from ancient Vorthak texts, but it had been bred out of his species for centuries. He was feeling pride in his children, but also loss for what he had never experienced himself. "What have the humans done to you?" he asked. "They showed us love." All 3 cubs responded together, their mental voices joining in perfect harmony. "They taught us that strength without compassion is just destruction. They gave us families." Dr. So-min stepped forward. "Commander, your cubs haven't been weakened. They've been completed. They still have all their predatory abilities, but now they also have something to use those abilities for besides conquest. And what would that be? Protection, building, creating, healing. There are so many ways to be strong that your species never explored." Keth Moran looked around his bridge. His young officers were listening with fascination. His older warriors looked confused and angry. "You ask me to abandon everything the Vorthak have been for 1,000 years, he said. "We ask you to become more than you've ever been," Captain Hyun-woo replied. "Your cubs proved it's possible. They're still Vorthak, but they're also something new." Science Officer Torval approached his commander. "Sir, I've been analyzing the cubs' development. Their telepathic abilities have increased by 300% since living with humans. Their problem-solving skills have doubled. Their physical coordination is better than any adult Vorthak on record." "Because they learned cooperation," Dr. So-min explained. "When individuals work together instead of competing, the whole group becomes stronger." On ships throughout the fleet, young Vorthak were making their own choices. Some demanded to be taken to the human colony to learn more about families. Others asked to speak with the cubs directly. A few of the oldest, most traditional warriors tried to maintain order, but they were vastly outnumbered by younger crew members who wanted change. Commander Vextar's voice came over the communication system from the planet's surface. "Sir, my remaining troops are requesting permission to help the humans rebuild what we damaged during the attack. They want to learn human construction techniques." Keth Moran stared at the tactical display showing his scattered, confused fleet. He had come here to destroy a small human colony and restore order to his offspring. Instead, he had triggered a revolution that was spreading across the galaxy. Reports were coming in from other sectors. Young Vorthak throughout the Empire were abandoning their posts, demanding answers about families and cooperation. Some were even protecting other species, instead of hunting them. "What do you want from me?" Keth Moran asked the humans. "Nothing," Hyunwoo replied. "We don't want to conquer your empire or control your species. We just want to keep raising our children, including the 3 you gave us. And in return? In return, maybe your people can learn what ours learned long ago. That taking care of each other is the strongest thing anyone can do." Keth Moran made the hardest decision of his life. He turned to his bridge crew and spoke words that no Vorthak commander had ever said before. "Stand down all weapons, cancel all attack orders, open negotiations with the human colony." The older officers protested, but the younger ones moved quickly to obey. Within minutes, the great Vorthak war fleet had transformed from an invasion force into something unprecedented, visitors seeking to understand rather than conquer. Over the following weeks, New Busan Colony became the strangest place in the galaxy. Vorthak warriors worked alongside human farmers. Young aliens learned to play games with human children. Scientists from both species shared knowledge freely. The 3 cubs served as teachers and translators, helping their birth species understand human concepts like friendship, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Keth Moran himself spent most of his time watching Spark, Storm, and Shadow interact with their adoptive families. He saw his offspring display abilities he had never imagined possible: joy, laughter, protective love, and creative problem-solving. "I understand now," he told Dr. So-min one evening as they watched Min-ho and Spark working together to help younger children with their schoolwork. "We taught our cubs to be perfect killers. You taught them to be perfect beings. We just loved them," So-min replied. Everything else followed naturally. 2 years later, New Busan had become the diplomatic center of the sector. The Vorthak Empire had transformed into the Vorthak Alliance, working with dozens of species they had once hunted. Young Vorthak throughout the galaxy lived in mixed communities, learning cooperation and compassion alongside their traditional strength and hunting skills. The monumental consequences of one simple choice continued to spread. By choosing love over fear, compassion over pragmatism, the humans had not just saved themselves. They had saved an entire species from the prison of their own perfection. Min-ho, now 14, stood with Spark on the hill overlooking the bustling interspecies community that New Busan had become. The former apex predator had grown into a magnificent creature, but its greatest pride was not in its strength or hunting ability. Its greatest pride was in being part of a family that had taught the galaxy that love was the most powerful force in the universe. "Thank you," Spark said in perfectly clear human speech, its telepathic abilities finally allowing direct communication. "Thank you for showing us that we could be more than we were made to be." Min-ho smiled and scratched behind Spark's ears. "Thank you for showing us that love really can change anything, even the fiercest predators in the galaxy." The consequences were indeed monumental, and they were just beginning.